So she kind of confided in me and said, the only way I can have children now is if a younger woman can donate eggs to me. I hadn't heard of egg donation. So a little light bulb moment came on and that was it. And she was like, would you help me? And I looked at her and I was like, I don't know. I didn't even think for a minute, I think. I just straight away said, yeah, I would help you. I would, yeah. Like that, straight away. And then the train was coming to Piccadilly Circus and I was like, oh, this is my stop.
Hi, I'm Marcia Fuchs. Welcome to Lives Less Ordinary on the BBC World Service YouTube channel. 30 years ago, on a crowded London Underground train, a woman struck up a conversation with a stranger and made a life-changing offer, a chance at motherhood. Guinea Bogle didn't just listen to this woman's heartache. She became a part of her story. So, what makes someone do that for a stranger? And what happens when the new life you helped create in secret comes back into yours? Guinea, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Guinea, could you take us back to the day of that tube ride? Like, where were you going? Was it one of those like packed train kind of days?
It was a night out with friends and I was on my way to Piccadilly Circus and hopped onto the tube at Holborn. It was a semi-crowded train. I think it was around about 6, 7, something like that. And yeah, I just happened to jump on the train and there was a child sitting there and I went in and just held onto the rails above. And he was just really funny. He was just being really cute and quirky and had everyone laughing in that particular section of the carriage. Then we kind of got ushered to one side because more people got on. And there's a woman on the train, her name is Anita, and she was standing right next to me and started a conversation with me and asked me if I had children. And at that time I had my eldest. He was only about 2, 3 years old. And I said, yeah, I've got one. And we said something else. And I think I explained where he was at that evening. And then I kind of went back to that conversation and actually asked her. And I was like, so do you have any children? And she said, well, I can't have children. I've gone through like an early menopause. And the eggs that she's producing, she said, are too mature and they're dying. So she kind of confided in me and said, the only way I can have children now is if a younger woman can donate eggs to me.
It's quite a deep conversation, right? Yeah. It's not like your normal tube small talk.
Yeah, it was a very deep conversation. And the weird thing was I'd never heard of what egg donation was. I didn't even know. I obviously knew about test tube babies and I knew about, IVF.
This was the mid-90s, right?
Yes.
This was not as popular back then.
It wasn't. So I don't know how long egg donation had been around back then. And so, yeah, it was a weird moment when she told me and I was like, oh my God, I didn't know.
And was it right at that moment that you thought, oh, well,
So weirdly, firstly, because I hadn't heard of egg donation. So a little light bulb moment came on. Like, I was like, oh, I didn't know that existed. And I kind of sort of shared to her, I was like, I'd love to help someone like that. And that was it. And she was like, would you help me? And I looked at her and I was like, I don't know. I didn't even think for a minute, I think. I just straight away said, yeah, I would help you. I would, yeah. Like that, straight away. No second thoughts to what it could do to me, whether it's a safe method or anything like that. Nothing at all.
Where do you think that impulse came from? Because at this point, you've known this woman for how long? Like 10 minutes?
If that, yeah. From Holborn to Piccadilly Circus isn't very long.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I mean, where do you think, like, what made you volunteer to donate your eggs to a perfect stranger?
So it's a weird thing. I've always felt like helping someone because it was something that I felt like I needed to do. But then when this happened, it was almost like that the two things kind of came together. It was like my one chance to help someone. I just was like, yeah, I would help you. It just kind of came together.
And was it something also about, your connection with Anita?
No.
No.
Nothing. I just had this conversation with this very sweet woman, and I was in for it.
Okay. So what did she say when you said, yeah, I could do this for
Yeah.
you?
And she sort of said to me, she goes, well, I need someone who's Asian, someone who's Indian. You're Indian, aren't you? She sort of said to me. I said, yeah, I am. And she was like, so I need someone, because I'm actually originally from Goa. And so and my husband is white. So I need someone who has a similar kind of background to me. So our child will look like us, kind of thing. That's what she was hoping. And then the train was coming to Piccadilly Circus, and I was like, oh, this is my stop. As you do. And I was like, how do I haven't got your number. Do you need my number? Is there? And she goes, look, I'll get off here and I'll get the next train. So then she jumped off at Piccadilly Circus with me, and then we exchanged numbers on the platform.
And at this point, were you thinking, okay, this is actually going to happen? Or...
Because she did say to me that she needs to ask her husband. And she said, and plus they're traveling for work, and he was already in their next station, already, setting things up so she could move over there. And
because they were diplomats and they traveled a lot for work.
Yeah, for work. They had to figure a lot of things out within a day or so. And then she did tell me, she goes, I will call you, not tomorrow, but I'll call you the day after. And, I'll speak to you then. I'll let you know for sure.
That evening, you get back home, and, you need to tell your husband about what you've just promised Anita, this stranger you've just met. So what do you say to him? How do you tell him?
I had a bit of practice that evening. I told my friends. I was like, guess what? I just met someone on the train, and this is this. And they just looked at me and thought, are you mad?
Did they try to talk you out of it?
They tried to talk me out of it. And then at the same time, I think they were like, oh, okay, if you feel you need to do this, then you go ahead. So I got their blessing. But when I got home, I had to tell Paul, and Paul was like, no way, you are not doing this. This isn't something that we do. And I think it took me a day or so to really convince him. And I was like, look, we've got one child. We're lucky. And say if we weren't lucky, say if we couldn't have any children, and we were in the situation that this couple is in, and, what would we do then if nobody came forward for us? And so I said, I just want to be, I just want to do this for someone. And that's it. And he was like, what if this child turns up at our doorstep years later? What are you going to do then? I said, probably won't. Then I explained the fact that they travel for their jobs. They won't even be in this country, so you're not going to see him. It was a very Indian mentality, I'd say. Like, what will people say? What if they found out you did this? What will that? Being the first generation here, I think we were protected by our parents a lot.
And what do you think made him come around finally? Which of your arguments kind of won him over?
I think I was just, well, I don't care what you're saying. I'm still going to do it. I was convinced. I was in for it. I was like, that doesn't matter what you say, Paul. You're just going to have to get on board, because I'm not going to not do this. I really need to do this for someone in my lifetime. And then he kind of, he got it.
Okay. And how about, the rest of your family, your own parents, right? You come from quite a tight-knit Indian family. Was this something you could share with them? Share with your siblings?
Yes, I shared it with my siblings. I told my sisters. They were all okay, but they were still as well at the same time, just make sure you know what you're doing.
What about your parents?
They didn't know. I didn't tell them then. I didn't tell them, because I think back then my parents were very strong-minded, and they had a lot of influence on us. And they would have probably talked me out of it, or tried to talk me out of it. I think I probably would have listened to them and then gone and still done what I did. But I just felt it wasn't probably the right thing or the right time for them to know.
Okay. And would it have been the same sort of line of thinking as your husband? Kind of, what would people think?
Yeah, what would people think? There's always some superstition or tradition that comes out you know, as we were growing up, parents would be like, no, you can't do this because of this. You can't do this because of this. There would have been some kind of thing they would have thrown at me at the time and said, well, our people don't do things like this.
What kind of things?
I don't know. There's always something, you know, it's your bloodline. You know, this isn't good. It's not good to give a child of your bloodline, because we're very much about being that connected family. And here's me giving a piece of me away. And it was like almost like that, you know, we don't do things like that. It's not the done thing because it's your blood.
How strict was your household growing up?
My household was very strict. Dad was super strict. I think it's because they were the first ones here, and they wanted to keep us protected the whole time.
So you just avoid that whole conversation altogether. You don't tell your parents.
Yeah.
And, you know, a few days later you get a call from Anita.
Yeah.
And her husband's on board, and they're all in. You're all in.
They wanted to meet for dinner. Then that's when they explained the whole process to me.
Yeah. Were you worried about how complicated this could become, that it could become messy?
I did not look at it. I did not look into it. I may have quickly skimmed through something at the time on Ask Jeeves. I think that was what was around at the time.
Oh, that was the big website, right?
And I think I quickly looked at something, and
it was kind of like the pre-Google or something.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I wonder how did you build trust with this couple, right? Because this is a huge thing.
I would meet Anita regularly, and I don't know, I just trusted her.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, in looking back in this day and age, and you don't know what kind of people are around. You don't know who you're going to meet or what, you know, with all the things that have happened in the world. You don't know. And I don't know, I think it was that time back then, you could trust people around you, I think. You kind of had faith in people around you. I think I had so many instances where I met people just randomly and they ended up becoming friends.
Yeah.
And you just, you know, just went on a whim. I don't know, something was guiding me, I guess. It was something, obviously, you know, this was meant to be. So someone was pushing me in that direction.
And did you and Anita kind of become friends?
We did, yeah. We became friends. Yeah.
You eventually donated 17 eggs. And I mean, emotionally, kind of, how were you holding up?
I think I was fine. I must have been fine. I must have just... It's like, that's the one thing I don't remember, what my emotions were like at that time. I was just like, I'm going to do this.
So you were just focused on the end goal,
that was
which was like helping Anita make a baby. Out of those 17 eggs, 10 embryos were created.
That's right.
But the embryo transfers kept failing. How was Anita doing throughout all of this?
I think she was excited and happy.
But when the transfers weren't working?
When they weren't working, I think she was just, okay. Okay. Gave it a go. I think she'd had 5 failed IVFs by this point.
Right.
You know, it was their last chance kind of thing. But then when she did ring me and told me that one of them did stick,
that last batch.
Yeah.
That last batch of 4. Do you remember what she said and how you reacted?
Yeah, no, she was like, oh, I'm pregnant. And I was like, no.
Oh, how connected did you feel to that little bump?
I think I was tired with the idea of it not being mine, and this was a gift.
When did you see him for the first time?
I think it
baby
was
named Christopher.
Day after.
The day after?
Yeah, I think the day after he was born. Yeah, I held him and I looked at him and I was like, oh my God, he looks like me.
Wow. And as baby Christopher was growing up, did you maintain contact with the family? You know, what sort of relationship did you have with him?
On his first birthday, I sent him a toy. And Anita would write to me and she would always tell me how he's progressing, how he's doing, what he does. And, you know, just his little quirkiness and cheekiness as he was growing up. So she would send me these long letters of everything that he was up to and where they were and what they were doing.
And would you see them when they'd visit London?
Yeah.
Because they were living abroad all over the world, right? But they'd come back from time to time.
They would, yeah. They would always come for one night. It was always very nice to see them, and it was always very pleasant. And they would just not stop telling me about him.
Christopher grew up not knowing the truth about your relationship to him. And it was only several years ago, as an adult, that he learned the truth. How did that happen? How did that come about?
So Christopher was told several years ago. They felt that he needed to know. And so they sat him down and explained. He knew that he was from an IVF background or journey, shall I say. But what he didn't know was there was a donor involved. And that's what they told him.
Yeah.
So they sat him down and said, you know, you come from IVF. And he was like, yeah, but what we didn't tell you is there's a donor involved. You know this woman. She lives in London. And can you guess who it is?
Can you guess who it is? And did he guess correctly?
Yeah, he did.
First guess.
He said
okay.
it was, first guess was, yeah, is it Auntie Guinea?
Yeah, so he took the news well.
I think he did. Yeah. Yeah, it must have been quite a shock for him at the time. But we spoke on FaceTime. As soon as he was told, his mum rang me and she was like, oh, you know, we've told him. And do you want to speak to him now? And I was like, okay. So I sat down and had a little chat with him. I said, look, you know what? One thing I have to say to you is I'm so grateful that your parents kept in touch with me all this time. And I've seen you at certain points of your life growing up. And I'm so grateful for that, because some people could have turned around and said, you know what? I don't want to know you now.
And Christopher ended up coming to London to see you. And to meet your family. Tell me about that visit.
Picked him up from Gatwick Airport. And I was very nervous on my way there. And then I stood there when the doors opened and he walked out. And that was, yeah, it was quite, we just both smiled at each other. And that was it. I gave you the biggest hug. Yeah. He kind of we just talked about everything. I brought him home and Paul was there. Paul gave him a big hug and he was all, yeah, it's all good. And then he met my youngest son and it was like, hey, bro, that kind of thing. You're my bro. You know, I didn't know I had a half brother and half sister. And it was quite nice because they got on really well.
Yeah. But still, all these years later, your parents didn't.
Yeah,
didn't
Mum
know.
and Dad didn't know.
And when you first, introduced him to your parents, you said he was a friend's kid. And kind of at what point do you decide to tell them the truth about who he is?
My sister insisted. She was, you've got to tell them. You have to. Because I was thinking, okay, maybe I don't tell him at this visit. I'll tell him when he comes again later on. That way I can work up to it. But she was like, everybody knows now. All the kids know. Everyone knows. We know. And if you don't tell them now and they find out from someone else, they're not going to be very happy with you. You've got to tell them. But I don't think they're going to be too pleased. That's what they said to me, and that made me feel even more nervous. They kind of really put the fear of God, because my dad isn't scary. My dad is lovely, but he has very strong, opinions, because he's the main man in our home. So he can be, whatever dad says kind of goes, that kind of thing. And so I was a bit scared. And being the youngest of 4 daughters, you kind of like, my older sister's always like, they're kind of the favourites. And I'm like the bit of a black sheep. Because I did things, I was a bit of a rebel.
Well, clearly.
And so I was very scared driving down with Christopher. And I was like, I'm really, Chris, if my dad and mum get angry with me, please don't take it the wrong way. This isn't at you. This is probably more at me. And then I get there and I walked in. I was like, Mum, this is my friend's son. He's come from Canada. Like that, all very happy and chirpy. And my mum looked at me and she went, hello, my son, like that. My mum doesn't speak English very well, but she managed those words and gave him a big hug. And when she said my son, we were like all like looking at each other thinking, does she know something that we don't know? And that was really bizarre. And then my dad kind of came in and sat down, and I was like, Dad, I need to explain something to you. I need to tell you how Christopher is related to me. And my dad looked at me like, why? What happened? Like, where's this going? And that's when I kind of explained. I said, look, Dad, his mum and dad couldn't have children. I was like, look, Dad, this is the situation. You know, his mum and dad couldn't have children, and this is what I did. I donated my eggs. It was the most weirdest, bizarrest conversation ever.
But you got through it.
I got through it.
How did they react?
My mum didn't understand. My dad understood straight away, but then he explained in Punjabi properly to her. And then he turned around and said to me, he was like, thank you. He was like, thank you for telling me. I'm so grateful. I'm so proud that you told me. And I'm so proud you did this. And then he turned to Chris and was like, I'm your grandfather kind of thing. This is your grandfather's house. You are welcome here anytime. Like that.
Wow.
And then I think he got up and gave him a big hug. I was so worried. I even asked him at one point, I said, you're not angry at me, are you? And he was like, no. He goes, why would I be angry at you? Because you've done such a good thing. You know, this is an amazing thing to do for someone.
Yeah.
And, you know, because I'm so proud of you for doing it. Yeah. I was like, and there's my sisters telling me, you're not going to be happy.
So how did you feel?
I was over the moon.
Yeah. Oh. And what did your father say when he met Christopher and learned the truth about him?
He kind of looked at Christopher and it was like, Beta, I'm your Nanaji, which means child. Beta is child or son. I'm your Nanaji, meaning I'm your grandfather. And which was really beautiful. And he was like, this is your Nanaji's house, that you can come here anytime.
That's so beautiful. I mean, how do you look back on all of it? You, Anita, Christopher, your whole story.
It was a heartwarming moment. It's a heartwarming story, definitely.
And I mean, what does it mean to you that Christopher can now kind of openly be a part of your family as well?
What does that mean to me? I love it. I think it's like you don't have to hide anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have to hide. He knows me now, and he can pick the phone up to me anytime, and he knows. And he's got the best of both worlds there. He's got two mums that, you know, love him to bits, and he can get a different bit of advice. Mum's a lot older, so she gives her advice in her way, and I'm like the more kind of cool
mom.
Cool mum, and I give him the advice that, you know, maybe he needs to hear.
Yeah.
But we do it, and it's good. It's a good thing. I think he's very lucky.
Ginny, thank you so much for all of your time and
You're
for sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching Lives Less Ordinary on the BBC World Service YouTube channel. Please remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, take care.